Ladies and gentlemen, kings and queens, listen to me. You are not born to just pay bills and die. You were born to walk in dominion, to maximize your purpose, and to fulfill a destiny that was custom, designed for you before time began. But here's the truth most people miss. You cannot access your destiny without faith. Faith is obedience in motion. It is not a passive sit and wait kind of belief. It's not wishful thinking, and it's not just reciting affirmations or quoting scripture without action. Faith is movement. It is the willingness to step when God says step, even if the ground hasn't appeared under your feet yet. It's the kind of radical trust that causes you to build an ark when there's never been rain, to walk into a battle with 5 stones and no armor, to leave everything familiar behind because you were told, "Go to a land I will show you." Faith is not simply believing something is true. It's acting like it's true even when the circumstances scream otherwise. Too many people think faith is a feeling. If I feel courageous, then I'll act. If I feel certain, then I'll move. But real faith does not wait for emotional confirmation. Faith steps into the unknown because it trusts the character of the one who gave the instruction. If God said it, that settles it. Whether your emotions agree or not, whether your bank account agrees or not, whether the people around you understand or not, faith moves. When you understand that faith is obedience in motion, you stop waiting for all the lights to turn green before you leave the driveway. You stop hesitating when you hear the call. You stop playing small because faith forces you to stretch. It demands growth. It refuses to let you stay in a place that contradicts your calling. Faith will test you. It will put a demand on your obedience. It will push you out of safe places. It will challenge your schedule, your security, your sensibilities. It will not always make sense, but it will always make progress. And every time you obey in faith, you unlock another level of purpose, another layer of your identity, another door in your destiny. You don't grow by understanding everything first. You grow by moving anyway. Abraham didn't wait for the GPS, he followed the voice. Peter didn't wait for a swimming lesson, he stepped out of the boat. These were not superhumans, they were obedient believers who understood that faith without movement is dead. You can't fulfill a divine destiny with convenient obedience. Faith will cost you something. It might cost your comfort, your pride, your fear, or even some relationships, but it will produce fruit that temporary comfort never could. And that's the power of faith. It produces what effort alone cannot. It gives you access to what hustle can't touch. Obedience driven by faith brings supernatural acceleration, divine alignment, and kingdom results. Every act of faith-based obedience is a seed that guarantees a harvest. So if you're praying for breakthrough, stop just looking for signs and wonders. Ask yourself, where have I stopped moving? Where have I allowed fear, logic, or delay to paralyze my faith? Because when you start moving in obedience, even if it's small steps, you'll begin to see God move in ways that only faith can unlock. Faith is not just a belief you carry, it's a force you release. When you walk in faith, heaven walks with you. Destiny responds to faith, not comfort. If comfort could unlock greatness, everybody would be walking in their purpose. If ease and safety could lead to destiny, then the most comfortable people would also be the most fulfilled. But that's not how it works. Destiny does not show up in your comfort zone. It shows up in your courageous zone. The life you were born to live, the purpose that was assigned to you before you were even formed, is activated by steps of faith, not moments of convenience. Too many people are stuck because they're waiting for destiny to fit into a package that doesn't require risk. But destiny is not polite. It doesn't knock on the door when you're ready. It disrupts, it confronts, and it demands a response rooted in faith. Every major shift in your life will require a moment of discomfort. It will require a decision that feels bigger than you, but that's the point. If you only move when it feels easy, you will always live beneath your calling. You were not built to survive, you were built to soar, but you can't fly while you're clinging to comfort. Faith is the wings of destiny. It doesn't make the journey predictable, but it makes it possible. And every person you admire who has stepped into greatness had to make peace with being uncomfortable. They had to say yes when it didn't make sense. They had to leap before they had all the answers, and they had to trust that the God who called them would also sustain them. Comfort is seductive. It whispers that you can wait, that you can play it safe, that you can stay hidden, but the longer you stay in comfort, the further you drift from the future you were born for. Faith, on the other hand, will stretch you. It will call you to make decisions with no guarantee except that God is with you, and that has to be enough. Because when faith becomes your foundation, you stop depending on ideal circumstances. You start moving based on conviction, not convenience. And that's where destiny begins to respond, not because you're perfect, but because you're willing, not because you're fearless, but because you're faithful. There are blessings, breakthroughs, and opportunities assigned to your name that can only be accessed through motion. The door doesn't open when you see it. It opens when you walk toward it. Faith is the key, not feelings. Destiny waits for those who are bold enough to believe, crazy enough to act, and committed enough to keep going even when it hurts. You don't get divine reward with human hesitation. Every level of purpose comes with a price, and comfort will never be willing to pay it. But faith will, and when faith pays, destiny delivers. So if you're serious about your purpose, you've got to be more loyal to your future than to your feelings, because your comfort zone is the enemy of your calling, and destiny is calling. Faith is the only way to answer. Faith comes before favor. We often admire people who walk in visible blessings, who seem to have doors open for them, opportunities chasing them, influence growing, and impact expanding. But what most people fail to see is that favor didn't find them by accident. Favor found them after faith made a move. Before there was applause, there was obedience. Before the platform, there was a private decision to trust God when it made no sense. Favor is not magic. It is the reward of faith. And faith is what triggers the flow of divine favor. People want the favor but avoid the faith. They want the reward but avoid the risk. But that's not how heaven works. Heaven responds to faith, and favor follows it. God never rewards spectators. He rewards participants. Favor isn't poured out where there's no faith being exercised. When you look through Scripture, the pattern is clear. The move of faith always came first. Noah built the ark before a drop of rain fell. Abraham walked away from his home before he saw the promised land. Moses stretched his rod before the sea split. The widow poured her last oil before provision overflowed. Time and time again, the divine order is faith, then favor. It's not the other way around. If you're waiting for favor to show up before you take action, you're going to be waiting forever, because God doesn't finance fear, He funds faith. Favor is attracted to movement. It follows those who dare to trust, dare to act, dare to believe. It does not fall randomly or without reason. It comes to those who are aligned with God's agenda, who move when He says move, who build when nothing makes sense, who show up even when the odds say quit. Faith is heaven's signal that you're ready for more. It's what says, I trust God more than I trust my feelings, my bank account, my connections, or my plan. And when God sees that kind of posture, He releases favor that no man can explain or contain. But the key is this: you must activate your faith first. Most people want God to open the door before they take a step, but faith is what unlocks the door. Favor is waiting on the other side of your obedience. And many are standing still, wondering why nothing is shifting when God is saying, I'm not sending favor to a place you refuse to walk into. It's your faith that goes ahead and clears the path. Your faith is what builds the bridge to what hasn't happened yet. And once that bridge is built, favor crosses over. Faith doesn't wait for a sign, it becomes the sign, and once that happens, favor has no choice but to follow. When you walk by faith, you are walking in alignment with the laws of the kingdom. That's when favor starts chasing you down, but don't expect favor if you're unwilling to move first. God has favor with your name on it, but it will only be delivered to the address of your obedience. So before you look for increase, ask yourself, have I moved in faith? Because the favor you're praying for is waiting for the faith you haven't yet acted on. You don't need clarity, you need courage. Most people are stuck, not because they lack opportunity, talent, or resources, but because they are waiting for every detail to make sense before they move. They've convinced themselves that they need a perfect plan, full understanding, and a guaranteed outcome before they take a single step. But purpose doesn't work like that. Destiny doesn't respond to hesitation, it responds to motion. The greatest breakthroughs are not born from certainty, they are born from courage. Clarity is a reward for the bold, not a prerequisite for the fearful. You keep asking God for a map, and He's waiting for you to just take the first step. We've been taught that the wise thing to do is to wait until the path is fully laid out. But God often reveals the next step, not the whole staircase. He doesn't show you the finish line when He tells you to begin. Why? Because if you saw everything ahead of time, you might disqualify yourself. You might talk yourself out of it. You might try to change the route. But when you walk by faith, courage becomes the fuel. Courage says, I don't see how, but I trust who. Courage says, I don't have the whole picture, but I know the voice. You don't need all the answers. You need enough boldness to say yes in the face of the unknown. Clarity is comfortable, but courage is powerful. Clarity often comes after the act of obedience, not before. The moment you move, the moment you risk, the moment you trust, that's when understanding starts to unfold. But if you keep waiting for every question to be answered, you'll miss every opportunity God sends, because faith is not about what you know. It's about who you believe, and when your trust in God outweighs your fear of uncertainty, you become dangerous to the enemy and effective in the kingdom. Courage will always demand more of you than clarity ever will. Courage doesn't wait for conditions to be perfect. Courage moves forward in spite of fear. Courage walks into rooms where you feel underqualified. Courage applies when logic says you're not ready. Courage gives when it looks like you don't have enough. And every time you choose courage over clarity, you make room for miracles. You make room for growth. You make room for destiny. God isn't looking for people who have it all figured out. He's looking for those who will trust Him enough to move when it doesn't make sense. He's looking for hearts that say, even if I don't see the whole picture, I'll obey the part I do understand. Courage is the bridge between confusion and completion. You're not waiting on clarity. Clarity is waiting on you. It's waiting on your courage, the next level of your life, your calling, your breakthrough. It's not locked behind more information. It's unlocked by bold, faith-filled action. The ones who rise are the ones who move forward, not because they knew everything, but because they refused to let uncertainty stop them. Faith is the currency of the kingdom. In the natural world, we exchange money for goods and services. Your dollars, your credit cards, your financial resources, those are the tools that give you access. But in the realm of the Spirit, in the economy of heaven, faith is what moves things. Faith is what gives you access. Faith is what unlocks doors, releases provision, initiates miracles, and shifts the atmosphere. You can't buy favor with money. You can't purchase breakthrough with effort. But you can activate both with faith. Faith is heaven's legal tender. If you want to transact with God, you have to stop trying to pay with logic, fear, or works, and start trusting that faith is the only acceptable currency in His system. Too many people are bankrupt spiritually because they haven't made any faith deposits. They're trying to make withdrawals from a kingdom account they've never invested in. Faith is what funds your future. It's what God responds to, not need, not noise, not even knowledge. God doesn't move because you're desperate. He moves because you believe. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Not unlikely, not difficult. Impossible. That means no matter how hard you work or how much you know, without faith in action, there is no kingdom exchange. Faith is what makes the supernatural natural for the believer. Every time you trust God over your situation, every time you declare His promises instead of your problems, every time you give when it hurts, speak when it's uncomfortable, or act when it's risky, you are spending faith. And here's the beautiful thing about this kingdom currency. The more you spend it, the more it multiplies. Unlike the world's economy, where spending leads to subtraction, in the kingdom, spending faith leads to increase. It builds spiritual wealth. It grows boldness. It unlocks next-level access. Faith isn't just a belief system. It's an economy, and those who know how to operate in it become dangerous to darkness. Faith is not passive. It's not sitting around waiting for God to do something while you stay still. Faith is aggressive. It pursues, it decrees, it builds, it moves. God honors people who trade in faith. That's why people who live by faith often experience what others only dream about. They see supernatural timing, unexplainable favor, and doors open that credentials could never unlock. That's not luck. That's kingdom currency at work. That's what happens when you stop calculating everything and start believing again. When you start saying, I don't have all the answers, but I know who my source is, you don't need more resources, you need more faith, because when faith shows up, provision follows, healing follows. Purpose follows. Faith is the seed that produces every kind of kingdom harvest, and if you want to see God-sized results, you must operate by kingdom rules. You must stop asking, do I have enough in the natural, and start asking, am I spending faith in the Spirit? The kingdom doesn't move on sight, it moves on belief. So if you're going to live according to kingdom principles, you've got to stop budgeting your decisions based on what you see and start investing them based on what you believe. Faith is the currency, and it's always accepted. Your destiny is voice-activated by faith. Nothing in the kingdom moves in silence. God created the universe not with his hands, but with his words. He said, "Let there be," and there was. That wasn't just a moment of divine creativity, it was a model. You are made in his image, and that means your words carry creative power. Your future doesn't respond to silence, it responds to speech infused with faith. Too many people are waiting on God to move, but God is waiting on them to speak, not with doubt, not with fear, not with worry, but with faith. Because in the kingdom, what you declare in faith determines what you experience in destiny. There is power in your mouth, but the enemy's greatest strategy is to keep you silent or to fill your mouth with negativity, confusion, or defeat. Because if he can control your confession, he can limit your future. Your voice is not just for communication, it's for creation. You don't describe your life with your words, you create it. You don't report what you see, you declare what God says. Your situation may look empty, but your words should still sound like promise. Your bank account may be low, but your confession should still speak abundance. Your environment may feel heavy, but your voice should still release joy and victory, because faith doesn't echo what the world says. It declares what heaven has already decided. Destiny is not released through passive agreement. It's released through bold, faith-filled declaration. That's why Scripture says, "You shall decree a thing, and it shall be established." Your decree sets the framework. Your faith gives it substance. Your words build the atmosphere your purpose needs to live in. And until you open your mouth and speak in alignment with what God has shown you, your destiny remains locked in potential. It's not enough to believe quietly. You must believe boldly and speak accordingly. Some of the greatest shifts in your life will happen the moment your mouth lines up with your mission. When you stop cursing your own future with small talk, doubt, or fear, and you start commanding your purpose to rise, your marriage, your business, your health, your influence, it's all waiting for the sound of faith. Not a whisper of hope, but a roar of belief. Heaven responds to sound. Angels move on assignment when faith speaks. Miracles begin when declarations are made. You're not just a believer, you are a speaker. You don't just carry purpose, you activate it. Everything you need to walk in destiny is voice activated. You don't need to see it to say it. You need to say it so you can see it. Your words are the down payment on your future. Speak healing, speak overflow, speak strategy, speak boldness, speak as if what you're saying already exists, because in the kingdom, your declaration precedes your manifestation. The atmosphere around you is waiting to obey your command. So stop being silent in seasons when your mouth is supposed to shape the next level. Speak it in faith, decree it in boldness, because your destiny is waiting, not for your next thought, but for your next word.